You saved my wife and my unborn child, but what you asked for in return, it shattered me. The millionaire's voice cracked as he stood before a sea of cameras, his eyes glistening with tears. He wasn't a man used to being vulnerable in public. He wasn't a man used to being saved either. But none of that mattered the day he met Jordan, the 17-year-old boy from the south side of Chicago who changed his life midair at 30,000 feet. Let's rewind to how it all began. It was a crisp autumn morning in Chicago when Jordan Harris walked through the airport doors, clutching his worn-out backpack and a folded boarding pass. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear of flying, but from excitement. This was his first time ever leaving the state. A scholarship program had selected him for a youth leadership summit in New York City, his dream city. It felt like the first chapter of a new life, an escape from the violence, poverty, and silence of his neighborhood. Jordan wasn't your typical teenager. At 17, he had already seen more loss than most men twice his age. His mother died when he was 9, leaving him and his little sister, Kiara, under the care of their grandmother. His father was never in the picture. Still, Jordan was kind-hearted, fiercely protective, and brilliant, especially when it came to health sciences. He dreamed of becoming a paramedic, inspired by the medics who tried to save his mother. As he boarded the plane, his eyes sparkled at the sleekness of the cabin. He moved past the first-class section where sharply dressed people sipped orange juice from real glasses. He felt eyes on him, some curious, some judgmental. But he kept his head high and found his seat in the back row, by the window. 20 rows ahead sat Eleanor Whitman, the glowing, 7-month pregnant wife of real estate billionaire Thomas Whitman. She wore a designer maternity dress and sipped ginger tea while flipping through a parenting magazine. Thomas, ever the workaholic, was reviewing business documents on his tablet. He loved his wife deeply but often got lost in his empire of money, hotels, and meetings. Thomas and Eleanor had faced unimaginable heartache. After 3 miscarriages and a stillbirth, this was their miracle child. The doctors had advised her not to fly this late in the pregnancy, but Eleanor insisted on accompanying Thomas to an award ceremony. "If something ever happens to me," she'd said, "I want to be with you." The flight was smooth for the first hour. Laughter bubbled from the front rows, the scent of roasted chicken wafted down the aisles, and flight attendants made small talk. Jordan had his headphones on, listening to a podcast about emergency medical procedures. But then, everything changed. A sudden gasp cut through the cabin. Then a scream. Then chaos. Flight attendants rushed toward the front. Passengers twisted in their seats. Jordan pulled off his headphones and peered down the aisle. "Somebody help," a woman shrieked. Jordan stood up, his heart pounding. He squeezed past other passengers toward the commotion. There, lying slumped in her seat, was Eleanor. Her face was pale. Her hands cradled her stomach. One flight attendant was trying to check her pulse, another was calling for a doctor. "She's unresponsive," someone said. "Is anyone here a medical professional?" Silence. No one stood up. Thomas looked helpless, his mouth opening and closing, paralyzed. His hand trembled as he held Eleanor's limp fingers. "Please," he whispered. "Please, someone help her." I've done emergency training," Jordan stammered as he stepped forward. "I know how to stabilize someone until help arrives." A flight attendant hesitated. "He's just a kid." "I know what I'm doing." Jordan insisted, voice shaking but eyes fierce. Thomas looked at him, disbelief and desperation clashing in his gaze. "You know what's happening? She's likely having a placental abruption. Or preeclampsia. We need to lay her back, keep her stable, and monitor her vitals." Jordan's words were confident, precise. He dropped to his knees, spoke softly to Eleanor, and directed the flight attendants like a trained EMT. He asked for cold towels, elevated her feet, and requested oxygen. He kept his palm on her wrist, whispering comforting words and counting her pulse out loud. Minutes felt like hours. The plane diverted course to land early in Pittsburgh. By the time paramedics boarded, Eleanor was semi-conscious, breathing weakly. She clutched Jordan's hand and whispered, "Thank you." Then she was wheeled away, with Thomas running beside her. The next 48 hours were a blur. Jordan missed the summit. He stayed in a cheap airport hotel, worried sick about Eleanor. No one had come to find him. Not even the airline. Until the third morning, when a limousine pulled up in front of the hotel. Out stepped Thomas Whitman. No entourage. No security. Just a father-to-be with swollen eyes. He walked up to Jordan, who was sitting on the hotel steps. "They're both okay," Thomas said softly. "Eleanor and the baby. Doctors said if you hadn't acted when you did." He paused. His voice cracked. "You saved my whole world." Jordan let out a sigh of relief and nodded, blinking away tears. Thomas looked at him, then reached into his coat and pulled out a checkbook. "Whatever you want, whatever your dream is, college, car, a home for your family, it's yours. Just name it." Jordan stood still. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "I don't want your money." Thomas was stunned. "What, then what do you want?" Jordan hesitated, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a photograph. It was of a little girl, his sister Kiara, wearing a homemade cape and pretending to be a superhero. "She's only 9. Smart, strong, always smiling even when things are hard. I want her to have a chance. I want her to grow up in a world where people don't judge her by the color of her skin or the zip code she lives in. I want her to believe in good people." Thomas stared at the photo. "I want you," Jordan continued, "to fund a scholarship. Not for me, but for kids like me. From neighborhoods like mine. Give them hope. Give them a shot." For a moment, Thomas couldn't speak. His lips quivered, and then he broke down. He cried, not from sadness, but from the weight of humility. No business deal, no real estate empire, no luxury yacht had ever made him feel this kind of purpose. "Young man," he said hoarsely, "you didn't just save my wife. You saved me too." 1 year later. At a packed auditorium in Chicago, the first Jordan Harris Foundation scholarship ceremony was underway. Dozens of students sat with their families, clutching acceptance letters to top universities. On stage stood Jordan, wearing a tailored suit, speaking confidently into the microphone. "Kindness doesn't ask what you have. It asks who you are." That day on the plane, I didn't think, I just acted. And if someone hadn't believed in me, maybe I wouldn't have known I could. Thomas sat in the front row, holding his infant daughter, Eleanor smiling beside him, eyes misty. The millionaire had found something that money couldn't buy: redemption, purpose, and the boy who gave him both. And that's why, when a black teen saved a millionaire's pregnant wife mid-flight, the billionaire wept, not from fear, but from the gift the teen gave back. A request that would ripple through lives, for generations. Kindness. Courage. Legacy. Sometimes, it takes a stranger at 30,000 feet to remind you what it means to be truly human.